Slroky. And we are from BNIM Architects out of Kansas City. I think I met a number of you. I know, of course, Kyle, because he worked for us for a few weeks, months. How long were you there?
6 weeks.
6 weeks. So Dan and I were architecture grads of 2013 here at Iowa State. Had Tom for our fifth-year professor. During that time, I guess you could say, skewed off the normal path of a fifth-year project and started doing a lot of computational design to generate form as well as do analysis on the building structures we were making. And it's led us to, now we work at BNIM Architects, and it's led us to an interesting role. And the branding is shifting. What we were called architecture technology, we're now being called virtual design and construction. In either case, it means that Dan and I work pretty much as, again, non-traditional architectural graduates, where we're not doing 100% build time on projects. We're working predominantly overhead time, doing research and development into new tools. And one of our main jobs is just to try stuff out, see if it works, and if we like it, try to get a good relationship going with developers to make the tools even better. So we'll be talking about some of the things that we've been working on helping develop over the course of the past year or so. It'll range a pretty strong gambit. As I said before, we're going to have some stuff that looks really interesting and nice and kind of cool, and then we're going to show some stuff that looks really, really boring, but is actually more interesting than the stuff that looks really cool. So I'll just jump into it with format. So how many of you...
Can we turn off the light behind you there? Yeah.
So how many people here have no format, have used it at all? Awesome. I was going to pay me big bucks for this. So I actually, BNIM has a really strong relationship going with Autodesk. We've had one since the inception of Revit so many years ago, and this is just one of those latest developments of that relationship. A former BNIMer by the name of Tobias Hawthorne started working on the Format project after Ecotech and Vasari started going downhill, and it led to this notion of Format, and I started talking to them about a year ago. I had seen Format right as I was graduating from Iowa State and as I was getting into BNIM, and I thought, oh, this looks kind of interesting, but I don't really know. It's kind of really basic. It doesn't really do much yet. But nowadays, Format does a ton. So this is the very basic interface for Format. It's completely web-based, which means it's device agnostic. You use it on whatever you want, and if you know SketchUp, you pretty much know Format. And a lot of people will tell you that Format is Autodesk's answer to SketchUp, or it's its rival. I would not say that. It's more of what I would call pre-designed BIM. So this is when you want to start a project up and you go into it knowing that you're going to have data that you want to pass back and forth between modeling and documenting. This is where you would start, because it's all very basic stuff. I can start by making very basic forms. I can start doing all this stuff that you're probably super familiar with, either from Rhino or from SketchUp, and it's not all that different than what other people have done in the past.
This is one of the weaknesses of BIM, right? Is that it's difficult to do conceptual design in it.
Exactly.
And this is their answer.
This is, yeah, and so right now, this is all very basic stuff that you could do in really any modeling program. But then you can start to do stuff that will look similar to what you can do in SketchUp with some key differences. So I can start off by saying, all right, where am I going to be? I'm going to 1640 Baltimore Avenue, Kansas City, Missouri. No weather stations. Normally there are weather stations. Strange. So I can say, okay, I want to import this map. And so one of the things you saw there was that there was this notion of weather stations there. And so what Format will normally do, and I'm not sure why it isn't picking up on it right now, but it will actually take weather station information and it'll give you automatically psychometric charts, wind charts, and that immediate information based on your location. And you can start designing with that information in mind. No need to look it up anywhere else. No need to go searching through other documents. It's right there and available. And I guess unlike some other, unlike SketchUp where it'll import terrain, they're not quite doing that yet, but I'll get to that in a second. Basically, I can start modeling this, with an actual footprint here. Start pushing and pulling. I can extrude up. Just move stuff since it was not actually going. And I can snap to a grid. I can do all this stuff. And if you'll notice what's happening here, like I've drawn some really weird lines here, but it's very good about Boolean modeling. So like unlike SketchUp where you're drawing planes and lines and it does a very poor job at doing add and subtract, this does it without a problem. It's much more Rhino-like in that way, but it's not as robust as Rhino. Obviously, it's web-based. But as we start doing this, you'll notice I have this properties panel open here. It's already added my location. I can put in a target square footage. Let's see here. There's my site area, and then target square footage. So I can say I want this to be a 30,000 square foot building. Okay, it knows that. I can then start to make groups of stuff. I can name these groups. So let's say building 1. I can start adding layers onto it, very similar to SketchUp. And I can also start to, and what will happen is I can also start adding things like levels in. So this is something that you don't really get in SketchUp. You don't get that kind of information. What that means is I'm starting to implement this information into my model. I can say, all right, use those levels. All right, automatically it marks where those levels are. So I know that now as I go up and down, increase some volume in here, I can see those levels get demarked out, and as I add levels, and I make sure that they're visible, I can start to see those in there. Now what this means is that I'm starting to layer information into this model, right? And as I layer that information, and I go and I save this sketch as, and I'll say this is just a test, okay? And let's see, does it give me my little pop? So you'll see it says now saving RVT file. So it's automatically saving a Revit file. So there's native compatibility between this program and Revit. So suddenly there's a back and forth between the model geometry and what you're doing inside of Revit. And as I make changes in Revit, I can come back. Let's see if I can quickly open this up. I'm on a loaner machine. Okay, and one other thing that you can see here is that I've already made a building and it's 38,436 square feet, right? That's over my target area. So I know automatically I have to start reducing some square footage. I have to start editing that geometry down, get my footprint a little bit better. I also, as I go and define even more information, I even get volume. I can even start to define a target FAR. And as I begin to develop this model, that target FAR will tell me, oh, you're getting closer or you're getting further away from that target FAR. Other things that we can start to do is collaboration. So so you'll see one of the pro features here. Also, most of the things I'll show you today are free, and you can go pick it up right away. This is one of the things that isn't free, but it's kind of worthwhile. So I can start a sharing session here, and I can immediately say, all right, Dan, go ahead and start a sharing session, and I'll give you or can you join the sharing session, or do I just have to send you the link? Okay. So I'm going to go and send Dan a link here. You and Anthony, you're not looking. Okay. And as I send that over to Dan, he joins up. There's so much stuff. So you see automatically, you can see my icon here, and are you in or? Oh, you gotta log in. Some other stuff that we're able to start doing is, like I said, you can start adding layers, you can start adding scenes, very similar again to SketchUp. You'll notice that these are very Revit-ish looking family, or like Revit families in here. That's because they are. They're Revit families that are preloaded into Format already. And you can see that I already have all my types in here as well. And I can link a library, and whether it's A360 online or it's a local library I have on my computer, I can start linking anything that I've made inside of Revit already. I can bring into Format and start messing around with it in there. So all the content that you may have already created, or it's content that you will create in Revit, you can bring it back. And content that you've made in SketchUp, you can bring into here through an add-in that I don't have on here, but I do have on here.
I'm in the sharing session.
You are? Okay. One second. Here's my Revit. So yeah, you can see I have a couple of different converters here. And this converter is free as well. I can convert Skip to Format 360 Sketch and RFace to Format 360 Sketch. So again, there's some conversion you can do, and if you've already started to work inside like what I would call a dumb model in SketchUp, not dumb because it's dumb and bad, but dumb because there's no information layered into it, you can bring it into Format as like a midway point, start layering that information in, and bring it into Revit, and suddenly you have a nice clean workflow started where you're going from a more conceptual model to a BIM model. So, and if we go back into here, you can see that Dan's now inside of the model as well. So if Dan starts to,
You can see I'm following you now. So.
okay, so as I move around, you can see on Dan's screen, he sees what I see as I make changes.
So it's a nice way to collaborate across offices. We've got offices in San Diego and Des Moines, so if you are giving a presentation, you don't have to do a go-to meeting or anything.
We can just do that, and then if I can control certain, I can say, oh, you can't follow me, or I can kick him out of the session if I want. But then also, he can also start to edit geometries within the session as well. So I don't know if you want to just try to, and you'll see that his highlight is different than mine. And as he moves stuff around and he decides to propose iterations, that's captured here. And I can see, and I could be across the country and I would see these updates as long as this sharing session is going. So collaboration is starting to be a bigger and bigger part of BIM. Other stuff that we can, that's happening in here is we can do materials, and it's actually, they started with a really basic material editor. Now it's very robust to the point where we have these really nice previews. But we can start to do cutouts. We can start to do bump maps. We can do color. We can do texture, opacities, and suddenly all these materials that usually you would open up and you would go into other more robust programs, you can do now on the web, anywhere, on the fly, even from an iPad now. So all of this is also available on an iPad version. And some of the stuff that we've done in the past with Format so far, I've got some of the stuff open here. This was a very basic model that we did as a volunteer project. So our overhead budget was basically zero. Like we couldn't spend any money on this. So we designed it all in Format because it was free. And so we were able to do even like basic like framing structures and understand how that was all going together. We could create custom families, and we could load it into Revit and create documentation right from this. We could propose different kinds of materials on the roof here. We could do, all these things that, normally we would have to use a program that we pay a lot of money for on the field. We can now do for free, and it was interoperable with the stuff that we already owned. And also, it was really quick. So, lost myself. It was also really quick. So, we went through these iterations, I think, within the course of 4 hours. So, we started just playing around with basic, massings. We said, okay, this is the basic mass we want. Let's try out a couple different ideas about what the actual size of this would be. Okay, let's talk about what this frame might look like. And as that developed, we just would copy and paste. And then there's other stuff that we've started to use this for. So we're looking at right now. This is the site. This is the site that I showed earlier, but this is also going to be the site of our new office building. So one of the things that we've started to do is we can start adding in. I'm just going to copy and paste this guy. So you notice when I copy and pasted this, it copied the group, and so I'm going to make it a unique group because all groups that I make are linked inherently. So things that happen in one group would happen in the other. So if I actually undo that and go in here.
Yeah, so one example for that is like we were working on just kind of a feasibility for a hotel and parking garage in Kansas City. And instead of using a bunch of section boxes and section cuts, you could have a group for each floor and then lay them out on the ground plane and kind of be tweaking and plan, and then it affects the actual 3D model. So it can all be contained in one, but using those groups, you can just have kind of a secondary way of editing, which is kind of nice.
And you have your basic shadows and everything in there as well, but then you'll see a button here, it's solar analysis. I can do inherent solar analysis using the same engines that Revit uses. So we can start to look at, I can either look at an entire geometry, I can look at a single side of the building. Oh, no weather station data available, so I can't do that, can I? Sad. But I mean, those are the basics of Formit. I don't want to go too much into it because this isn't really a how-to, it's just introducing you to some of these tools. But now, one of the things that I can do real quick is I can just show you that if I go and I open, although I don't have my A360 grid, do I? No. All right. I mean, basically, what I'm just trying to show is that this is a quick, easy modeling tool. I'm layering information in there, and let me see. Is there? Let's see, I can probably save out as.
It's still got limits to, I mean, it doesn't have a very high ceiling in terms of like the complexity of the models that you put it in. I mean, 'cause
Actually,
it's web-based.
well, yeah, it's web-based, but it's surprising
Yeah.
how complex that we can get.
But there's no scripting or anything.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
But they do have some advanced modeling tools, lofting, all that kind
It
of
does
stuff.
have lofting.
Yes.
It does have lofting. So yeah, if I go back here,
I see those pieces, the corrugated metal on the top, right?
Right.
Well, that's an extrusion, but
yeah, that's all extrusion based. But then I've got join and unjoin. I've got sweeps. I've got covers. I've got lofts.
so you do end up getting.
You can get some pretty good-looking complex geometries, and that's how I and I like just even making like this faucet. Like I just did a quick follow me, and very basic, very quick. But it's stuff that you wouldn't think to be in a web-based modeler.
And it does a nice job with like curves and stuff, not necessarily like SketchUp. You
Yeah.
can see each of the different
Yeah,
facets.
Yeah.
So
So
it technically does that, but it renders it in a nicer way.
Yeah, not nerds, but it's
Yeah, it's not-
But it's some kind of dynamic, adjustable,
Right.
like
So,
level of
like,
detail.
Yeah.
If I scale this guy up.
But the export geometry is pretty clean.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's nice.
So
Well,
like,
and the whole point is that this is the kind of skeleton that you would do the more complex work on.
Exactly.
Like, you're trying to get the kind of 4-hour, very quick scheme out
Right.
of this.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't really need terrain yet, so that's not really high priority. You don't really need to get down to what are your details yet. It's what does this look like on a site? What do some of the neighboring buildings look like in relation to this? And like yeah, you can see the curve geometry here is very different than what you might see inside of a SketchUp model. Yeah, it's all very like the name says, formal. And the whole key is being able to take it and do other stuff with it in other programs. So like I said, there's native Revit, but then I can export it as OJ, as STL. And those are all things that you can bring into Rhino, you can bring them into SketchUp, you can bring them into Maya or into 3ds Max. You can go 3D print these right away. And actually, because of the way this models, if you use, if you don't import geometry, if you just build stuff right off of it, so it does what I call sticky joins. So like, if you don't group stuff together and you just lay them on top of each other, they'll kind of merge together automatically. And that actually makes for really great 3D models to print. Because they're automatically watertight using their geometry tools. So unlike if you've ever tried to do a SketchUp print, which I've had, because of the way our firm works, I've had to try and clean up about 1 billion SketchUp models to 3D print, and it's a pain in the butt. This is a much better tool for that, and it was one of the reasons I actually picked up Formit as a professional tool. So I think I have, so yeah, I can open up this test. Upgrade the model. I guess they have it open for, they have it natively exporting as 2015, but since this is a really basic thing.
So the Pro is a subscription base for
Subscription based, $300 a year, which is, for Autodesk products, that's actually super cheap. But anyway, so you can
We can probably get it.
you can get it on
Super
education.
cheap.
Yeah, you can get it for free
Absolutely.
essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you can see, this is that building that I was working on before. All the geometry is already made. I have all my levels already in here. It has basic floors already created as a mass floor. So that's all done. I can then edit those floor elements as I want. This is in here as a basic family group. But what I can do is I can model walls on the face. I can start to add in windows on there. I can model, if I brought in a curved geometry, I could create curved curtain walls by the face. So all this stuff that used to, especially when I was going through school, all this stuff that I would struggle with because I tried to do it natively in Revit, suddenly it's a lot nicer to go and just do this and then bring it in and let Revit do what it's good at doing and not try to force it to be a nice modeling tool, which it's not, unfortunately.
Is it like bidirectional with the Formit? If I update it, does it update back to?
It's kind of, sort of.
Okay.
That's a piece that's in the process of working on. So they've had 2 major like stretch goals that they've met, and that's the next one. So they did, how do we make a good modeler? All right, how do we make a good presentation tool? All right, now how do we finesse it to the point where collaboration is seamless? And that'll be over the course of this next year. You'll see a lot of updates to make interoperability more accessible and to make exports a lot more accessible. So, but I mean, as it is, this tool is actually really viable right now, and I would consider learning it and picking it up, because once you get into practice, everything is going to be pretty much Revit based, and that comes with its own amount of headaches. So picking this up now is, in my opinion, going to save you time, a lot of headaches later when somebody gives you a SketchUp model and tells you, all right, now just go make this in Revit. So, and now you can, there's a little bit, you can be like, okay, click, 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 all right, it's in Revit.
Or like, why start with SketchUp?
Right, that's a big question I've had. You'll find a lot of people in the field, especially today, especially I guess at BNIM. I haven't had a whole lot of, I've had some talks with other people, but it seems like this is a common problem. Is there was this time when SketchUp was the king, and people don't want it to not be the king anymore. And I'm sure a lot of you use SketchUp, yeah? Yeah, I think everyone here probably uses SketchUp. And again, that's why I don't want to phrase this like it's the SketchUp killer, but it's a good alternative to SketchUp that will get you into Revit quicker and will get you documentation done a lot quicker. So, I guess some of the other features that we have that I haven't gone over, no, not this. So some of the settings you can edit, some visual settings. We can do actual energy cost analysis on these natively within the web app using the Green Building Studio. So again, it's the same energy analysis that you'll run out of Revit, but you don't have to load this into Revit to do it, and it will provide for you some really basic cost analysis. So which are your buildings, for where you are your buildings in a good proportion to each other, given your contextual information, like do you need to add louvers to a certain side to reduce some glare or to reduce heat absorption, and where it's starting to go is so one of the parts that they did with a material editor now they're starting to layer the same Revit information that you have in Revit. They're starting to layer that now into the materials you have here. And I don't know if it's going to be at the Autodesk University release or the one following it, but I think that's when that's going to come out. Is basically you can take all the materials that you've made in really any program, but predominantly in Revit, you can load them up here and they'll keep all that information. So all of a sudden, if you define a specific concrete, you can have that specific concrete for energy analysis. So that's a lot on format. I'm a little winded. I'm going to let Dan take over for a little bit, and then we might switch back to show off some other stuff if we have time. But he's got a lot more interesting stuff. Yeah.
So can you transfer a SketchUp model into Format?
Yes, there's a conversion. There's a free conversion tool
Okay.
on the Format website. It's an add-in for Revit, and you don't even have to open up a model. You just open up Revit, go add-ins, SketchUp to Format. Gets it done in like 2 minutes, depending on the size of the model. But I've done pretty big models.
So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the daylighting stuff we do at BNIM. I'd say for the past at least 3 or 4 months, that's been like 70% of what I've been doing. We do a lot of sustainable projects, so especially a lot of our San Diego office, we've got like 3 or 4 net zero buildings that are coming in. And so we need to have the daylight analysis kind of across the board in all phases of the project for just kind of various things. This study was actually done for our new headquarters that Brandon was talking about, but I've been using a lot of grasshopper and ladybug and honeybee, which kind of, I don't know if you guys use Diva, but runs on the same stuff. It's just free once you get out of school, which is kind of nice.
It's integrates between Diva and grasshopper.
Yeah, I mean it runs on Dasim and Radiance, and so it's. I can show you the script. There's kind of a lot to it. This is literally just the geometry, and then this is the analysis portion. I've disconnected all that for now, and essentially what we did for this is we kind of wanted to see for all these different options of these louvers, just to get an analysis of, we wanted one number, which we can see here, which is the spatial daylight autonomy, which is used for LEED a lot of times. But in general, to get a good sense throughout the year and kind of get all that data in one spot, while still having it be something that's editable. And so Grasshopper is really great for that. We've seen what other firms are doing where you can kind of create these nice dashboards inherently in the Rhino model. Like this is just looking at a viewport in Rhino. I can switch it to like a perspective view, and you can see that it's all getting rendered in 3D space. These are actually Grasshopper points, but they kind of blur together, which is really nice for showing that off. And so we've been doing a lot of that analysis this is just one little quick bay, but really what we're looking at is making it easy for either the client or a principal or a designer to use, so they don't have to look at this script that you see here on the right and kind of freak out and then just not want to use it. So breaking it down to just having these different options where we can go and we can switch the angle, and instead of taking 10 minutes, it'll take hopefully just like 30 seconds here, and we can see that it'll update and then it'll change the geometry for each of these. And so it'll take a couple minutes, but essentially what's happening, so that you can see it update, is we've just got a bunch of Excel files that are really boring, and they're just labeled, just by the angle of each of them and the date and the time, and we can parse that information and pull it out and kind of use that to extract it. I can quickly show you the number of files that we have here.
It's pre-calculated.
Yes, it was actually done in the cloud because over like a weekend, because we wanted to run, 3 times a day, 4 times a year, 4 different blades, 4 different angle options. You multiply each number of those options together, you get like 10,000 or something like that. It each take like 30 seconds or something, but it takes a long
But
time.
you want to make it interactive, so you need
Exactly. So it's kind of doing the dirty work kind of on the front
That's
end.
good.
So then you can interact. I mean, here's every single one, and they're all
That.
the same amount of thing, which is super boring, super ugly. And so it's really about making it so you can be with the client and you can,
You want to iterate.
yeah, you can
Exactly.
do that iteration kind of on the fly. And so that's kind of one example, but it's, for me, really seeing things like the percentage decrease from a base, so you can, as you run those iterations, you can start to get a sense of whether you're moving in the right direction. Because, you know, one phrase that I've heard kind of a few times recently is that, like, every model is wrong, it's just how wrong it is. So especially when doing this energy stuff, you know, architects are not professional daylight energy modelers, anything like that. And so a lot of it's more qualitative, and you're just kind of seeing degrees of difference. And so, you know, here's another example where trying to decide spacing on certain, let me go back and switch through the layers, but but you can start to see that, you know, we're trying to figure out a spacing on an existing building and whether it's going to hurt or help, and there's kind of some limits in terms of we're trying to reduce costs. So really kind of basic stuff, and we run through these iterations and you can see, oh, we have this, you know, 35% decrease in the cost based on the material, but you can see that only a 5% increase at one time, 18%, okay, that's not so good. And you can start to tune this and kind of have direct things that you can show your professors now, but your clients later, your boss, that, hey, if we run it this way, you know, we save this much, but we gain a lot more. We kind of, the loss is a lot less. And so creating these on the fly is really kind of important, and kind of having them set up so anyone can use them. So this isn't the perfect example in terms of the whole script, but breaking it down where it's like this is all you need to do is kind of the key portion of that. So here's another example of just doing, so speak a little bit more about Ladybug and Honeybee. There's a lot of stuff, as I'm sure you guys are aware, like Diva can do a lot of different things. And so it's really knowing which tools are useful. You can do some visualizing of weather data, but even basic things like shade benefit analysis, where you can see in the dark blue the areas that are doing the most work in terms of the shade. So you can start to take a building design and you can see actually which portions on an environmental standpoint are doing the work in terms of kind of giving more thermal comfort to people. And so you know, I think the phrase data-driven design is becoming more and more common. It's like you can't just necessarily give an aesthetic reason for doing something. You need to back it up with data in some way. And I think Grasshopper and tools like Dynamo have been kind of a boon for doing that.
Yeah, and I would say that on top of that, one of the things that what we found coming from a firm that has historically been an environmental firm, like BNIM was pretty much from the 90s onward nothing but green design and sustainable design, was that you usually had experts in our office that would be able to sit down and tell you from their gut, yes or no, this is right, this is wrong, based on rules of thumb, or they would have knowledge of some program that could run a huge amount of analysis that would take a long time, and they could read the numbers. One of the things that we're trying to do is give this more into the hands of everyday architects, so that even if you look at that Excel spreadsheet, you probably wouldn't be able to know like what that meant, or you wouldn't have an idea if that's good or bad. But kind of like what a lot of other programs are doing, we're trying to make it so that it is more graphic and it's more understandable, not only just to you, but to whoever you show it to, which is becoming more and more important, I think, in our field right now.
Yeah. So similarly, we're starting to use tools like Dynamo as well. Sometimes on kind of this visual aspect. So this is an example where we've got just a really basic, this is a sample floor plan, and you've got this person in the room, and you want to measure, how much access to views can you get. So this is definitely useful for things like hospitals, but really just in general, there's a lot of research being done in terms of views and access to daylight being kind of valuable for design. And this is all kind of basic stuff that's actually built into Revit, and it's just kind of using it in a different way. So here you're just taking you can see the person, and here it's just like a generic Revit person, and you're setting a sight line and just kind of points in every direction, and you can start to see, okay, like what percentage are we getting of views. And so it's ways to, and we can move the person and that can change everything if we agree on that. And so I think a lot of it speaks to a little bit what Brandon was talking about, is like not being limited by your tools and not being having to try and convert SketchUp into this and then make sure it didn't import completely properly, or having to do a lot of like manual photoshopping and stuff like that to maybe I broke it.
Yeah, that is one of the things we're going to get into later, is how we're combating like this issue that we're facing right now of machines getting locked up and stuff. But like for instance, I've got a Dynamo script on here running. Let's see, which one is it?
Well, it wants to be cloud-based.
Exactly.
You want to send it to the farm and then have it just send you your
And
results.
that's exactly.
That's what they're doing.
And that's what, and Dan will get into that later. But yeah, this has been running on my machine now for the past, or I guess this one, I guess if anyone can see, this has been running on my machine now for the past, day and a half? Just because and it's a really boring script too. It's just trying to figure out all the line types that people have brought into their Revit models and messed it up with those. And we're just trying to cull it out, but there's like 17 to 36,000.
Totally optimized too. Like let's be, and
It is.
the way that these things work.
It's like 36,000
Like
lines.
they do a lot of brute forcing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and architects who code do a lot of
Yeah.
brute forcing. Do you guys know what we're talking about in terms of that? Like, it's not like an elegant algorithm. It'd be something that just tries every single combination of everything.
Right.
And
Instead
so,
of finding the best way to do it, it just goes through every way of doing it.
which takes forever and
Yep.
slows you down.
But then, so one of the things that we've started to do, and I don't know if you want to show anything else before I.
I've got a couple.
Okay, I'll let you show us a few more things before we get into that.
So yeah, I was just actually using what the issue was before, as I was pointing, moving the wrong dude around.
Okay.
Wasn't actually an issue. So, and then just kind of other options. This is kind of an example file we worked with where Revit's great for things that are like parametric families that are kind of built into each other. Rhino seems to be better at handling geometry, and just in general, I like Grasshopper better for
Geometry.
especially doing a lot of conceptual scripting, I guess, if you could say in a way. And so here's an example where we've got this like super parametric family that can do a lot of things, and then we've got somewhere a Rhino file, and we brought in the geometry from Revit, and we can start to move this stuff around, and it'll affect, you can see like what's lit up in red, and then that'd be a way to like start to like add some variety to your facade. And then if we come back and run this, essentially it's kind of writing to an intermediary file, and then it kind of, you can affect the parameters, so you can see where there was the darker red, you have these thicker kind of spandrel panels. And so that's a super basic example, but it's a way of showing that you can start to use different tools to drive. So like once you bring something into Revit, I know I used Revit way more than I should have in school, and as part of it was just because that's all I knew, and so there was a lot of limitations by that. And so I think it's starting to be where you once you bring something into that, you can still have all your sheets ready for your review and stuff like that. But if you need to change something on the fly, you're not limited to, I have to re-import, re-export, or I have to tweak everything by hand. You can start to use these tools in concert with each other to really do what you want to do. So I think I might have one more. I don't know, I think that was it.
Can you elaborate on what you mean, like you used Revit to motion school?
I would jump into Revit pretty early on, and so there'd be a lot of programming being done in Revit, which kind of didn't.
So like trying to do conceptual stuff in
Revit.
Yeah, like things would be more limited to plan-based stuff because I could just quickly draw walls and then, okay, that's kind of the right size. And there are some examples of tools where like, I don't know if you guys still give like program, this
bubble diagrams.
This space needs to be this number of square feet. But there was one example that we did where you can have this kind of just massing block family, and you can read from Excel, and then it'll just place them on there and just make them the right size, and so you can start to move them around, and that's instantly done.
Yep.
And, you know, if you just enter into an Excel spreadsheet, hit run, bam, you've got all your little blocks to move around. So you can start to jump into Revit a little bit sooner, but it's still, I didn't know that kind of stuff back then, and so it's definitely more limiting.
And massing wasn't very good until Ansari didn't have it either, right?
Yeah,
It was
right.
kind of tough to do that conceptual
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Massing in general was really hard to do, and now a lot of that is now getting ported to Format. But then I would say another thing that I've noticed is that as we have been looking into these more and more, one of the things that we keep finding is that this notion of the architectural tool belt, just as it was, you know, a lot of people are, when Revit came along, a lot of people looked to it as like this kind of silver bullet of a program, but it didn't do that. And then people thought, oh, maybe SketchUp's a silver bullet, maybe Rhino's a silver bullet. And really, they're all tools that will do a specific job for you. And it's just learning how do they talk to each other now so that you can use the right tools for the right time. So instead of trying to force Revit to do modeling really well, we can do our modeling in Rhino, we can bring the geometries into SketchUp, or we can start modeling in Format. And then we can start to process like raw data in Excel, and then all of that information can get layered into Revit later. And actually, we found that a lot of our PMs, our project managers at BNIM, very rarely actually want to get into the Revit files like hands-on. A lot of them are far more comfortable looking at the numbers of things. So they like to make nice looking spreadsheets. So then if we can just take those spreadsheets and we can plug them into a Revit file, suddenly their job becomes easier, your job becomes easier, because communication is happening easier. So,
I broke my computer, so we'll switch
Yay.
to you. But I can show that example that I was just talking about. I was
Okay.
trying to get that loaded up.
which example?
The kind of little massing blocks where you can just kind of,
Okay. Do you have it?
yeah.
Or, okay.
so once I get that back to everyone, I can show that off. But
Okay. So what do you want to talk about? Do you want to skip your other stuff for now, or?
yeah, you can do the VR.
Okay, so we're gonna take a break, I guess, while his computer comes back to life. Hello. There we go. Maybe. Yeah, there we go. One of the things we're gonna kind of end on a high note on is some of the really interesting stuff that we're doing with another company called Flux. But while his computer comes back to life, I'm gonna dazzle you with pretty things. So one of the things that I went to when I went to Acadia on was the notion of how do we then, now that we know that this architectural tool belt exists and we know how we're layering information in, how are we presenting that to people? How are we getting that information out there? And one of the tools that we started to, we explored two tools, one that's kind of old, one that's kind of new. The first one that's kind of old is called Unity, and it's a video game engine modeler. It's been around for a while. I don't know, some of you are nodding like you've maybe done some stuff with Unity. A little bit. So I'm just going to show you one of the things that we did, or that I've been working on since I got back from Acadia. It'll open.
Do they know what Acadia is?
Oh, okay. What does Acadia stand for? I
It's
can't
the
remember.
Association for Computer-Aided Design in
In
Architecture.
academia, right? Or in art?
I think it's
Or in architecture.
Oh, there's some people. There's a few people who practice.
That's true.
But
It is a pretty. It's. So I went mainly for workshops, and I went at the beginning before a lot of the presenters came in. Dan was there for the workshops as well, but then he stayed for the rest. I don't know if you want to talk about what you saw at the
yeah.
actual thing.
So the actual conference was a lot of people exploring new ways of making, a lot of like robotic arms and stuff like that, but also just kind of thinking about different material systems, and then just new ways of designing. One person kind of created his own video game so kind of like Minecraft, but on like an urban level.
I had it sound.
Sorry.
That's our CEO, Steve McDowell. But basically, this is our new headquarters office, and walkable, really easy to understand what's happening in these areas. We've got some basic daylighting happening as it goes from day to night. I just fell out a window.
You gotta fix that in design.
Yeah, I didn't add a mesh collider onto everything, only on basics. But this is kind of a different way that currently we haven't thought about presenting to clients before. is I can package this up and I can send them a thumb drive with this on it. They can open up, they can walk around. I can start adding information into this bottom banner here, and they can understand in a very simplistic way what's going on. You know, we have a park next door, you walk inside, you know, this is a gathering space, here's where you go up, here's our nice little atrium. You know, it's all very intuitive, and the communication, suddenly, I could do this, and I could communicate an entire design almost without words now. You know, I could send this to people all over the country, different languages, pops up, this is simple, this is easy to understand, and it's, because it's, you know, your basic, you know, walk around commands, it's all very just simple. And that's kind of where we're going, is more complex maybe on the back end, more simple on the front end, more understandable on the front end. I'm going to end that quick, but so that was one of the things that we really started to explore was video game technologies can handle massive amounts of geometrical information. And also all the stuff you saw was from 4 different modeling programs just meshed into one. So I had Rhino, I had Formit, I had GIS data, and I had Revit. So all of that was kind of just combined and thrown together there. So yeah, it's also a wonderful, another one of those little areas where like you can start to blend information together. Stuff that you would almost consider to be siloed in other programs suddenly can come together and look good together, rather than if you're trying to do it all in another program that only takes one type of file. The other area that we explored was a tool from Thornton Tomasetti. And we were actually the first ones to demo this guy. It's still in its like really early alpha stages. So what you're seeing here is a JSON file, .json file, that I've loaded into a public Dropbox, and I've loaded that into this program that they host on their servers. And this is all a web-based view of that same building that we were just walking through.
The JSON is a Java database.
Yeah, Java database file. So
similar to Format, and they're both kind of running on the same language.
Yeah.
Kind of like.
And basically what this has started to do is, again, kind of what Format has been trying to do. I've been able to put in some layers so I can make things appear and disappear. I have views, so I can say I can move to a certain view, and it takes me there. I can also do just my basic zoom in, zoom out, pan. And then you'll notice when I click on it, it gives me some attributes here. And this one I haven't added a whole lot of stuff into. Let's see, this is the farmer's house, which was one that we did as a test model. I think this should have, let's see, do I have any, I didn't layer any other information in here. But, yeah. And so one of the things that when I go to their main website, which is vrx1.elasticbeanstalk.com, you'll notice that I have this VR one here, and then I don't know if anybody wants to try this out. If you got a phone, want to try this? No?
Google Cardboard.
You can try Google Cardboard out.
Fine.
Sure. All right. So basically, I'm gonna tell Dan. All right, go to. I'm gonna send you the public Dropbox link here into your email, okay? And you're just gonna copy and paste it. This one. There you go. So get that link and just copy it. I don't know, David, have we ever gone through this together? All right, this is his first time too, so you'll see how easy this is.
So just go into Chrome.
Yeah, just open up Chrome and go to vrx1.elasticbeanstalk.com.
This is mostly like a presentation.
Yeah, this is predominantly presentation, but and again, this was a really rough tool. Like it was, Thornton Tomasetti had just finished updating it and got it to a point where they felt comfortable to releasing it. I think 2 days before the Acadia presentation, and so.
Turn off time out. Wait, sleep. Then sleep.
What? Oh yeah, that would be good. And there was a couple. The people that we worked with there was Anna Poyle and Elchin, and I can't remember her last name. They're both. If you ever Google Thornton Thomas Studies Course Studio, they're kind of on the front page right now, and they're really interesting. So go ahead and tap on the goggles, and then paste that. Put your name in, and then paste your. So you'll notice automatically up on here, you'll see on the right hand side, I had a user just join in, that's him. Are you good?
You have to flip it into horizontal, right?
Yeah. So, I don't know if you can see there, but as he's moving it around, you can see that that model keeps coming in and out of frame. That's because he's live.
Is that him there?
Yep, that's him right here. So it's tracking his position, it's tracking where he's looking. And me as a presenter, I can see where he's looking, and I can actually take him from view to view.
You can drag him.
I can't drag him yet, but I can say, all right, we're gonna go
Get over here.
we're gonna go to exterior view
Oh,
1.
you can set him up. For,
And then he's put right there. So again, it's this notion of I could send this link out to people around the world. They can load this up. We could be on a conference call together, and I could say, okay, we're looking at view 1, we're looking at view 2, we're looking at there you are. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, pass these around.
did it sleep?
No, I set that to an hour. Is there supposed to be something in here to like prevent it from falling? There we go.
You always hold it.
Yeah, I
Might have
guess
to
try
hold
using it. And it's kind of over that way for whatever reason.
Oh, good.
Yeah, they're to the left.
To the left.
Okay.
That's okay.
So again, it's this notion of that.
Got it.
There you go.
Look at me. There you go.
So again, it's this notion of taking it, and then as I click on things, like if he gets to see, he gets it back in frame again. I don't know if he doesn't quite have it in frame anymore.
Nope.
Has the touch.
Let's see if I can
It
see
worked,
where.
it worked as I was panning over toward that way.
Is he able to move?
Okay, I
There you
see.
are.
Oh, it's behind us.
So I can select things, and then he'll see that get selected and deselected in his view as well. So if I have other pieces and parts, they're going to be. I can layer that information into those pieces and parts. That information will show up to them. It's all right. I'll just don't break the phone. It's okay. Break the
That's
card
the part that
Don't worry
we're-
about the. Anyway, another thing that we saw there, and it's going to be released in their 2 point, or their, I guess 1 point, or whatever version, it might be like 0.2 build, is they're actually tracking the 2 center points of the eyes, and then looking at where that focus point is, and they actually will automatically start highlighting things as you look around, so you can start to create a very heads-up display. So if you've ever played any kind of video game that is a shooter at all, or any kind of, even role-playing games these days, how you have all those maps and status bars and things along the edge now, well, you can start to talk about, okay, so what kind of structural member are we looking at here? Is it steel? Is it concrete? What if it's a steel? What kind of steel beam is that? If this is a slab, how thick is that slab? Is it reinforced? What's it reinforced with?
So like a Terminator.
Exactly, like a Terminator. And so,
Setting this dystopian.
a little bit more hopeful,
Yeah.
way more hopeful. But the hope is that we'll be able to start having more of a, let's see, I'll try to reset your view here if I do that. Or, let's see if I do there. There we go.
Just control
And then you kind of lost it there. But anyway, how you doing, Dan? You almost ready?
Maybe? Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, so while this is very simplistic right now, it basically goes to show you that things like programming, coding, layering information, that kind of stuff is getting more and more built into architecture and is starting to inform it more and is going to help inform our clients and communities. So one of the big things that BNIM is very much part of our core mission is how we reach out to communities and how we engage them. Whether it's a private building, whether it's a public building, whether it's a community plan, we're engaging in the community surrounding these sites. And being able to provide them with information like this, which is far more understandable than even just a static rendering, gives them the notion that they are part of it, that they understand it, and it's not a deal behind closed doors. It's something that they can have a say in, they can understand. Here, you want me to reset your view here?
Try angling it up.
Here, hold on. Let's go to default view. No? Steer? Almost. Where are you?
Oh, it's
Turn
right,
around.
right behind you.
You have to look at the wall.
Yeah, he's coming behind as well.
Where that is.
I think the Android version has a bit of a drift to it. If anybody has an iPhone, it might work better. But so public engagement is just a really big part of what we do, and having tools like these and getting people who understand how to make stuff for tools like these means that we're able to provide a higher value, one, to our clients who suddenly aren't an enemy to the community, they're a part of a community, and two, it's big for our civic presence. So we're right now we're going to be using these same tools here to do a public engagement in about 2 months for a huge bridge project that we're doing in downtown Kansas City, where we'll be rehabbing a bridge. And we are looking to get public opinion and engagement through these tools so that they understand what our intent is before we even begin the process of filing paperwork, which in general has only been, you only used to be able to do that through static images. Now we're going to be able to do it through animations, through virtual technology. So, yeah. Ready? We're going to switch back to some of the grasshopper stuff now.
Just kind of one or two more things.
I might have just ended the session too.
Oh yeah, it might.
One other thing I'd say about, I don't know, I guess we've kind of talked about this in Dynamo. I don't know if you're going to talk about this now, but we chatted before about how we kind of prefer Grasshopper to do more formal stuff and Dynamo to be more process work stuff. And really, I think that's one of the key things that I would say we found as we've explored these tools is that while Dynamo may look very much Grasshoppery and do a lot of the Grasshopper functions, it really is about taking workflows and streamlining them so you have more time to design rather than spend your time trying to set up a sheet or troubleshoot a Revit issue or do these very mundane tasks that normally take now 2 to 4 hours every time you do them. Now you're doing them in 30 seconds and you're spending more time being thoughtful about it.
To speak to that, so one of the tools that we're just trying out now is something called Flux. They're a startup out of San Francisco, and they're trying to do exactly that, where you have like a platform where you kind of put your data, and then it can get sent down to all the other tools that you use. So they've got something for Excel, got something for Dynamo now, and they're talking about AutoCAD, Revit, 3ds Max. They're in beta, but I know you can try it out, and actually they have a design competition for students, and you can win like up to $5,000 if you kind of have a cool use for their tool. So might be something to look into, but I can just show quickly kind of how it works. But basically, it'd be a way where like normally, like before I showed you, we saved an Excel file, and then I had an ungodly amount of different Excel files. I think it's like 30,000 of them in my Dropbox, and so to sync them today, it took like 45 minutes, so it's kind of annoying, and so this is a way where you can kind of have like a web-based thing to be the intermediate. So here we've got it set up where it's actually sending some of this information to Flux. And so if I go here and I go and look at this data view, they've got this web page where you can see the last time something was updated, and you can see that data. Okay, that's kind of cool. How is that useful though? The big thing is that you can have that stream to a different platform. And so here you can see me change this from 3600 to 3400. And if we look here, you can see it's already updated here. So, okay, that's pretty nifty. But how can it be useful for me? So, this is the Dynamo script to basically do what I was talking about, where you can have your Excel file and it can create these cubes. So let's go ahead and run that. And now you can see here we've got these just arbitrary planning cubes. You can see you have the area, 9,000 square feet. And the wind didn't go in for some reason, but and you can start to add things like color. But kind of the interesting thing is since Dynamo can run automatically, if we switch that there, and we make sure that Flux is kind of constantly looking at the square footage, we can go and change something like one of these lower numbers from 625 to 2500, and it updates automatically. So that's kind of cool in a way that, if it's just you, that's kind of nice. If you just kind of have it running in the background, you can have that live feedback as things change, but it's kind of useful if you're collaborating with the teams. If someone decides, oh, we need to change the floor-to-floor height or something like that, if you set up your model right in Dynamo, you can have that affect your Revit model or your Rhino model or your Grasshopper model, whatever, and you can make those changes on the fly.
So it's being hosted on Flux's cloud,
Yes.
not your Dropbox.
Correct.
And that's how it's able to update. So it doesn't have to sync and then update.
Correct.
This is sending the ping that tells it.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Massively redundant parametricities, right? Like anyone can.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like middleware, basically, right?
Exactly.
It's not.
Yeah.
So it's
it
not-
doesn't change what you do, it just makes what you do easier.
Sure.
And so I think the last thing that we'll touch on is kind of the Acadia hackathon thing that we were talking about a little bit earlier. You can send geometry through Flux, you can send just the numbers through Flux. So to show an example of how you can send geometry, we'll go back to another project. Like I mentioned, we were doing a lot of daylight analysis, and a lot of our projects are kind of always in Revit. And so we can go and do something that's locally small. We'll just do the columns for this project. This is like right out of Revit, and so you can actually look at your geometry and you can see it live. And so the big thing that I use this for is I can take this geometry via Dynamo and send it up to the cloud and then bring it into my Grasshopper model. And if they change the Revit model, if they've got this script running in the background, minimize, then they can update my Grasshopper model as I'm working on it, and they can rerun that. Or we can have something that's just waiting and listening, and it can rerun that. So it's a nice way where you can collaborate with people, and they can be tweaking things, and you're working in different platforms where you don't have to send files, share Dropbox, that kind of stuff. So at the hackathon, what I did was kind of use that in a completely different way. Instead of sending geometry, like I mentioned, you can actually send Grasshopper scripts, so yeah, little snippets. So
With XML.
yes, let's make sure it's all set up right.
Oh, there it is.
But basically, it's a way that, so these are both on one machine right now, but we've tried this out with two separate machines. So just imagine these are two different ones. I've done this where this one on the right would be a cloud computer with just really awesome hardware, and so it can do things really quickly. And you basically, so I'll delete all this stuff right now just to show the basic example. You just have this group with whatever you want to send up, click a button, and it shows up on the other side, exactly the same. So what I've used this for is you can like have a daylight analysis, or like I've used it or you have a daylight analysis and you've got something like ready to go but disabled. When it shows up on the other side, it runs, and then what I had it set up for before, this actually sends the result, whatever's coming out of our operation, back. And so if we click that, sends that, and then on this other end we see that really tough operation of addition was done on another machine, and it shows up. And so, like I mentioned, that'd be a way to like send, you could just send stuff to other computers, or we've kind of looked into the idea of you could just use it as kind of like a way to send a chat message, or like it's like, oh hey, I need this little piece of a snippet, and you're both in Grasshopper, you can kind of send it via IM built within Grasshopper. So kind of a weird way to do that, but I think it's kind of a
It parses the XML from the script that you've copied, and then just puts it on Flux as data in Excel, and then reparses it as the Grasshopper component.
yeah,
And then, then the
It's
grasshopper.
clever. Yeah.
So here you can see.
There's probably lots of things you could do with that. If you
Exactly.
do that, then there's all kinds of.
Suddenly interoperability becomes a much bigger, there's a lot more opportunities.
Yeah.
Because we can translate a lot of stuff into that kind of data and
Sure.
bring it out, so.
Yeah, so I think that's all stuff that we have. I know it was a lot, like a whole range of things, but are there any questions? That's just kind of like how, some of the things that we're working on that we're excited about in terms of the technology side and making the design process easier for everyone. But any questions?
How are you getting this into practice? I guess it's the big question,
That's-
right? I mean,
so that's-
how are people picking this up and
It's
using
a lot of grassroots stuff. One part of it is, I'm doing a lot of work for this one office, our San Diego office, since they're doing, like I said, those net zero projects. And so part of it's like, every time they need this kind of stuff done, they come to me, and so it's a little bit of balance on their interest in saving time because they run it themselves. And then on my side, I can show you an example, hopefully, of like attempting to document the file well enough.
That somebody can follow through.
So
That's one thing that we've seen from a few other firms like Element and Thornton Tomasetti and DBJ, is that they actually create Grasshopper and Dynamo standards for documentation now, and we're starting to implement that. We're trying to start implementing that as well, so that anyone can open up one of our scripts, and just like a programmer would comment their code, we're trying to comment our stuff so that it becomes more readable.
yeah. So the thing that I opened, I think might be right. Okay, sorry, maybe not.
It's funny too because the tools for that aren't really great.
Yeah.
So they're all kind of hacky.
Exactly.
It's
And-
interesting Grasshopper standards.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so
Okay.
here we go. You can see, do not delete. I'm trying to highlight, okay, and like rename things. So whether you're looking at the context or the shades on this building, you have to point it to a weather file. So the big things are really highlighted, setting your analysis period. And then these should probably be grouped because these actually kind of tell it to run. So still a work in progress, definitely. But in terms of just kind of documenting it well enough, and then if it's something that doesn't need to be messed with ever, you can cluster it together. So it's just kind of
Abstract.
it's a way.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah.
What were the firms like you said, like NDBJ?
Element with their tech studio, and then Thornton Tomasetti with their core studio, Woods Baggett, some other ones.
Yeah, actually, I
You have
have a
your
tweet
list?
from one of those guys talking about dynamo standards where you.
Grimshaw's another one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Ryan Relick, yeah.
So starting
We
to
actually met.
name that stuff and kind of make sure everyone knows what it's for, and then have a central repository. So that's the biggest way. And I think for Dynamo, a lot of it is, it's really beneficial for mundane tasks that people hate doing. Like we have an example of like creating sheets or creating print sets and automatically making PDFs, stuff that people hate doing and doesn't benefit the design process at all. And so that's, I think, kind of the, gateway drug into some of this
Yeah,
stuff.
that's how
is
that's
they
been.
start thinking about that, and they start thinking about, oh,
If I can do that.
yeah, like what can we, why do we have to do it this way every time? And I think it gets people to a level where they can at least start asking those questions, if not exploring them themselves.
I would also say that recently, in terms of incorporating it into practice, BNIM's taken a few steps forward in terms of giving us the freedom to do this. And so I think more and more firms are seeing the benefit of bringing on people who can work in these tools and develop these things for them on more of an overhead side, and then introduce it into practice via these methods of either giving some samples out and teasing them in, and then getting them to ask for more, or
More drug analysis.
yeah, basically, Dynamo's a drug, but a good drug, the kind you want to prescribe. Or we're going off and we're doing talks like this, where we're bringing attention to these tools, or we're going and, or there's a lot of times, like, for instance, the Unity thing, like, nobody in our office was looking at video game stuff really at the time, and then I just did it on the side once I came back from Acadia. I've shown it to people in the Des Moines office, San Diego, and in KC, and suddenly it's now like, oh, we get that. We want that. And it's making something that's flashy enough that people go, oh yeah, I want something like that, but I want it in a different project, and I want it in a different way, and I want it done in 2 weeks, which, while puts us under a deadline and gives us a lot of stuff to do, it makes us start incorporating it into practice a lot more.
How
So
many people in your organization do what you guys do?
we are the two primary people,
Yeah,
I would
in terms
say,
of our role, we're the only two, but
and
Yeah.
we're right now 100% overhead. So
What's the job description? What's the job title for you?
so
Hacker.
it's changed. So
Hacker residence, yeah.
Dan's in the process of changing it. They've changed mine. Our department is going to be called Virtual Design and Construction,
Okay.
and we were Architecture Technology. So and that actually all started when I joined up in their IT section and worked through that to
Oh.
formulate this part of it, because I have a lot of IT background. So in between doing help desk stuff, I was doing architecture work and building up some of this stuff. And then I really needed Dan to come on and help too. So.
It's interesting you mentioned the kind of gateway drug. Like, my first exposure to Dynamo was this summer. I was doing this, I had a consulting gig with this little firm in Virginia. And they were saying, like, just before I arrived, they had to renumber, they had to change all the room numbers on the project.
Yeah.
Right? It's one of these, like, pain in the butt tasks that,
Right.
And so this one guy was playing around with Dynamo, and he wrote this quick script that just, like, let you draw a line and renumber all the rooms on the floor in seconds. And so the partner was like, wait a minute, show me that again. And he showed it to him, showed him the script, and the next day they shut the office down. And the partner was like, everyone is going to learn Dynamo today.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're at a point now where it's not just like we're using better tools, it's the point now where we can write the tools.
Right.
And if that saves, the partner was saying, if that saves 3 hours every time we have to renumber a floor, we're gonna make back this day that we're all just like shutting down
Yep.
in a couple weeks.
yeah.
It was amazing to watch. Like, this is not a progressive firm. This was like a kind of stuck in the mud,
Yeah.
mid-sized firm.
Our probably the one that got us the most attention actually was on the John F. Kennedy Center project that we're working on with Stephen Hall, and he basically got a note from the client that said, I don't want to call this thing Glissando anymore, you have to call it the Lake Pavilion. And so all the sheets, all the room names, everything in the entire Revit model and document sets had to be renamed from Glissando to Lake Pavilion, or River Pavilion. And they were estimating, I don't even know how much time it was going to take one person to go and just rename everything. So we just took the day, we wrote the script up to account for all kinds of text in all areas, and had that done in a day.
It's funny that you need to do that, because if it was a Word document, it'd just be finding replace.
Control F, yeah.
But the fact that you had to do that even on a Revit project, which is information based,
Yeah.
I mean, you can do it,
You can.
but you have to do like an extra layer, onto it.
And
That would seem to be one of the selling points of BIM,
right.
right, already.
And I guess, and one of the things that we've talked about with Autodesk, as Dynamo has gotten more and more popular, as that's going forward, it's become more of a way for them to identify what's wrong with their program and And actually, a lot of this stuff that came out in 2016 were Dynamo scripts that people had written up, enough people had done, and had made enough comments on. They're like, oh, we should just build that in.
Yeah, they just coded it as an icon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because all this does is, before we were working in Dynamo, it would be people who worked in the API of Revit to make custom buttons and
So
stuff
you're
like
like
that.
sort of like a code developer.
Exactly. And so now, Autodesk sees they're basically going to start. They found that the way they make money off of this is, well, we let it go for free, and people make stuff for us, and whatever's popular, we build in. So.
So, okay, the question that I'm sure a lot of people in this room would like to ask, that I'll ask for them, is if they're heading into the profession in 6 months,
Yeah.
or 18 months, or 30 months, like what should they be doing now so that they are on top of this kind of technology?
So in addition to just honing design, allow these to help hone your design skills. So as you move through a project, identify what about the project is going to be probably the biggest pain in the butt, and then find a way to make it less of a pain in the butt through one of these tools. And so begin to do some research, do some idea development, go onto some forums, because it's now getting to the point where if you think you have a problem on a project, somebody else has had that and they've posted about it, and chances are they've written a sample script. Half the stuff I learned from Arcalab with Conrad from Grimshaw. And it's because he was asking the exact same questions I was asking only 6 months before I did. And so you can go on, you can see what people are doing with this, you can see some of the solutions that people are coming up with. If you come in contact with a design issue, try to use one of these tools and just let yourself take the time out to teach yourself the basics to solve that problem. Because once you learn the basics of solving one problem, that information is translatable to the next problem, and you may have to learn a little bit more each time, but after 3 problems, you've suddenly learned a huge base of knowledge on which you've now become, and essentially at this, what would be considered at this point, pretty much an expert in the programs. And I would say that more and more employers are looking for people who can work with this kind of mindset of, if I don't know it and the program doesn't do it, I can go learn it and I'm going to build it, and then the cycle just keeps feeding itself, and you just become stronger as a designer because of it.
Yeah, I will say, I guess personally, I had some difficulties, like for example, Grasshopper, sitting down and just kind of trying to learn it by itself. I had to have a problem.
Exactly.
So, and there was a couple of false starts where I spent the first quarter of my semester thinking that this was going to be, yes, it's going to be great, and then just having to completely just sink it and then go into Revit or, Revit.
Tom knows.
But
I did the same.
after a few times, it kind of became easier and easier, and then, things became more advanced, and really, again, let the problem guide what you're looking for, and I think that's kind of the easiest way. Whether it's Grasshopper or Dynamo, any sort of coding, even format, anything like that, just try and approach a problem using a different platform. And usually, I know Grasshopper and Dynamo are very different, but these tools kind of use generally the same operations. You're not working with anything drastically different. So there's a lot of parallels in everything that you're doing. So
And
trying to find those is beneficial.
I would also add on to that, leave time to make, like Dan said, leave time to make mistakes. We probably did not leave enough time for the mistakes we made in our semester here. And in general, now that we're in the working world, we do try to leave room for us to make a mistake and to royally screw something up, so that we can learn from it and go back and do it again, and this time do the same process just twice as fast and do it better than we did before. And I think that's something important to keep in mind when you're working in these new tools, is that you're probably going to, the reason why my computer back at work is locked up is because I screwed something up in my script. So I got to go back and redo it,
That's our theater design script from 50 years.
Oh yeah, I remember this guy.
Show, do you have what it?
Do we have the output still?
Let's find out.
I don't know. So in our 5th year, we had the Boston project, which was to design a symphonic hall on a very tight site in Boston. And I don't know if it'll generate.
I think
anything.
it's probably trying to reference geometry.
That's not there anymore. And so we actually created several different kinds of scripts. One was to generate a form based on a shell that would fit the program that we needed inside of it. So we developed a number of different things that created a shell structure and then took that shell structure and parsed it out. But then we found that didn't really, we got kind of caught in there for a long time. And then we kind of came to this realization of, well, if we don't want it to generate form, if form is what we're going to really spend our time designing, what's the things that we're not going to do that is going to take a lot of time? And part of the requirements of that semester was acoustical design and sightline design. So we wrote a basic script that took a seating array, that created a seating array within a given area, and then would check the sightline of those seats. Is everything okay, or?
Oh, it's just really missing.
Yeah.
Here you can see like the ones that have a proper sightline angle, kind of horizontally, so left to right. And then in the green, you can see the ones that are the blue are the ones that are good, orange are the ones that are bad. So it'd be a quick way to, as we tweak the geometry or tweak the overall form of the stage or the actual theater itself, kind of get that instant feedback.
So we ended up doing a lot of, we designed a lot in Rhino and then used these to check our design as we went forward. And then at the time we were using Ecotech to analyze our acoustics. And that was where the majority, we spent a lot of time in there, not so much in other areas. Yeah. So.
Well, guys, thanks so much for this. This was great. I think what would be nice if you guys have the time, if people want to hang out and talk one-on-one, and
Yeah.
ask questions.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sure that people have got individual things they'd like to ask or would like to play with the goggles a little bit more.
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's give these guys a